Hey everybody, welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. So today we are talking about Marty Rathbun and his lies, Marty Rathbun lying about not knowing Serge Gil. What the hell am I talking about? I will explain. All right, well, for those of you who regularly watch this channel, I sort of assume that you know who Marty Rathbun is. I sort of assume you already know who Serge Gil is. But for many of you who may be watching this for the first time, I'm going to give a little bit of context, a little bit of an explanation. Marty Rathbun is one of the most senior executives to ever leave Scientology and speak out publicly. He was a very good friend of Mike Rinder's after they left the Sea Org. I would say while they're in the Sea Org, it's just that in the Sea Org, it's hard to call anybody a good friend, and it's probably very hard to say that Mike and Marty even were friends in the Sea Org. I'm not really sure that they were, but regardless, in their lives after Scientology and after the Sea organization, Mike and Marty were very close. Marty was a very, very vocal critic. He wasn't just somebody who left and said a little bit of things. He left and said a whole lot of things. He had a blog called Moving On Up a Little Higher. I believe Marty was in Going Clear, the documentary by Alex Gibney. Marty's did an interview with the Tampa Bay Times. Marty was one of the highest profile, loudest, and most effective critics. And after the Sea Org, after leaving the Sea organization, he married a woman who had never been in Scientology. Her name is Monique. I think her nickname is Mosey. And Marty was subjected to untold levels of harassment from the Church of Scientology. And Mosey, because in her capacity as Marty's wife, also was exposed to untold levels of harassment. And because of that, there was a lawsuit that Marty and, Mosey had brought against the Church of Scientology. And they were doing very well with the lawsuit. Everything was sort of going their way. And kind of all of a sudden, out of the blue, Mosey dropped the lawsuit. Marty essentially disconnected from all of his friends who had pretty much surrounded him and supported him during his time after leaving the Sea organization. And not only that, but he went on to essentially go back to Scientology, not in a literal sense that he's a member of the Church of Scientology again, but in the sense that he's doing the bidding of David Miscavige. So if you look at Marty Rathbun's YouTube channel right now, you're going to see a whole mess of videos that he's done over the last year or two, responding to almost every single episode of Leah Remini Scientology in the Aftermath, and basically trying to debunk and discredit and insult every person who has ever appeared on Scientology in the Aftermath. He did one such video about me. I then did a video on my channel responding to everything he said in his video. I think the name of that video was something called My Reply to Scientology Attack Dog Marty Rathbun or something like that. And anyway, I feel like I'm getting a little bit too much into the weeds here, but where I'm going with all this is let me introduce Serge Gil and who he is and how he has anything to do with Marty. So Serge is someone, I knew him first as Sergio Hill. I've known Sergio since I was 13 years old. I met Sergio here in Clearwater when I was studying at the Flagland Base. Sergio was a member of the Sea organization. He was posted at the Flagland Base as a course supervisor in one of the higher level course rooms. I'm just using general words because I don't want to give definitions for things right now. And Sergio was born and raised in Scientology in Mexico. His parents sent him to join the Sea organization here in Clearwater when he was either 12 or 13 or 14 or right around there. And Sergio was raised in this environment of the Sea organization. Sergio has recently been very vocal and very effective in describing what the Scientology experience, what the Sea organization experience, what the auditor experience is like for a minor child growing up in it and being intimately involved in all of these processes and procedures. And he has been very effective in opening many people's eyes, including mine, to just how twisted and destructive a lot of these policies and procedures are to the kids that do them. And you wouldn't think somebody would have to open my eyes to something like that, but I'm saying this as far as giving me a different perspective. People who are victims of certain things do not always see themselves as victims of those things. It can be difficult for someone to view themselves as a victim of something. And this fact very much applied to me in my own experience, having worked full-time for the Church of Scientology from the age of 12 to the age of 26. Full-time. Not 9 to 5, not 5 days a week, 9 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, from the age of 12 to the age of 26. I did not go to high school. I did not finish middle school. I do not have a high school diploma. My formal schooling ended in the 6th grade. I then did homeschool for the 7th grade, and that was the end of my formal education. My growing up, my upbringing, my adolescent years, my young adult years were all working 110 hours a week for this fucking cult. And if you watch enough of my videos, I think you know what I mean when I say that I do not usually almost ever talk about myself as if I were a victim, or talk about my experience in a markedly negative way. And I have my own reasons for that. But I'm mentioning all this because it really did take a conversation that I had with Serge, must be a couple years ago by now, where he kind of reframed for me a lot of our shared experiences. You know, we've gone through some similar stuff. And it really did take him pointing out to me, like, Aaron, look at this thing that we did. Look at this thing that we were a part of. I'm speaking generally, but we were speaking in specifics. And he goes, look, you and I are used to looking at it this way. That's not the right way. Fucking look at it this way. Look how crazy what we fucking were doing here was. And I almost feel silly describing it this way, that somebody would have to go, hey, did you look at it this way? But sometimes that's what's needed, man. I mean, I was fucked up for days after this conversation with Sergio. It was me, Sergio, and our friend Nora Crest, or Nora Ames. And man, I was really fucked up. I was fucked up. You know, it's this funny, weird thing where it's like, I've been looking at it like, I know what I went through, I know what I experienced, I know I didn't like most of it, and I'm okay that I went through all that, but you know, I would never let my kids go through it. Sometimes it takes someone else pointing out to you, why wouldn't you let your kids go through it? If it wasn't that bad for you, then what is it about that experience that you would not allow your kids to be subjected to it? And so framing it like that, taking a look at that closely from that perspective of, what is the reasons I would never let my kids do this, even though I generally think of myself as someone who wasn't greatly harmed by it, got me to sort of back away from it a little bit and really look at how fucked up the stuff we as young teenagers, preteens, had to participate in or go through or experience or do or whatever. And again, I feel like I'm getting a little bit into the weeds on this, but if I just went into this video saying, hey, there's this guy named Marty and there's this guy named Serge, and Marty's lying about not knowing Serge, I think the whole video would kind of not serve much purpose. You have to know who these guys are. So Sergio is someone who has been speaking out the last 1, 2, 3 years, and his focus has been very intensely on the child experience in Scientology, how destructive it is, and how the policies of the Church of Scientology create an environment that is conducive to child abuse. And Serge was interviewed on either 2020 or 60 Minutes within the last year. I'm not great with dates right now. Serge did this whole interview with 2020 or 60 Minutes, focusing on his story. They had to cut out the shit that was really hard hitting. The 2020 and 60 Minutes were too scared to leave in the really hard-hitting stuff that Serge had to talk about. This was before any lawsuits had been filed. This was before police reports had been filed with the Clearwater Police. The media was like, oh, we can't touch this for now. Well, you know, shit's about to change. And these things are going to be covered. And I do expect to hear about all of this in Monday's episode of Scientology, Leah Remini, and the Aftermath, are about things that occurred within the orbit of Marty Rathbun. And Marty knew this when Serge was going to be on 2020 and Marty didn't yet know what was going to make the cut or not make the cut. So Marty put out some video or blog post at that time all about how he'd never even heard of Serge Gil. I know him as Sergio Hill. Marty's like, Serge Hill? Never heard of the guy. I don't know who he is. He's making all this up. And then because of the promos that have already been released for Monday's episode of Scientology in the Aftermath, Marty Rathbun once again knows that Serge Hill is coming to the table with a lot of information. I believe Serge put up a Facebook post last week that made very, very clear he considered a lot of this to have to do with Marty Rathbun. So once again, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Marty puts up a post about how never heard of the guy. So I'm just here to provide a little bit of information proving 100% Marty Rathbun knows who Serge Gil is. I just can't believe Marty would be so stupid as to lie about something like this. Like, lie about something that can't be easily disproven. I mean, this is ridiculous. I was at Flag with Serge when Marty Rathbun was at Flag, working in the training department in the same course rooms on the same projects that I and Serge were involved in. So here is some information to the best of my recollection. So sometime around 1994, David Miscavige launched here at the Flagland base in Clearwater some new pilot programs. So pilot means they were test programs to completely redo, or I should say, to do in a way that he claimed had never been done before, the professional TRs course and the professional metering course. And for the purposes of this video, I don't really want to try to define every fucking term that I use like I normally do. So I'm just going to go and see what happens here. So the professional TRs course is basically an auditor training course that focuses on communication drills. And the pro metering course is the professional auditor training course where you basically learn how to use the e-meter. And Miscavige had decided that nobody had ever correctly done the professional TRs course before. Nobody had ever correctly done the professional metering course before. And he was going to personally put together some pilot programs to train people in the TRs and to train people in metering to a standard that had never been achieved in the history of the universe before. And so my brother, Colin, and Serge were two of the very first people to begin going through these programs. And I was going off on a different program at that time. I wasn't on those programs with them at that time. But these were very hot programs. Command and Tension, which means David Miscavige, was fully focused on these things, which means the executives at the Flag Land Base were focused on these things, which means all of the CMO staff were focused on these things. And you had special intermissionaires fired into the Flag Land Base to personally supervise the pilot pro TRs check sheet and the pilot metering program. And these programs took a long ass time. So I said this started around 94. It wasn't until sometime late 95 or early 96 that Marty Rathbun came to the Flag Land Base. It was a very big deal. Sergio was going through, he had sort of a dual role. On the one hand, he was part of the small group of people who were being put through these programs as students. On the other hand, he was a Sea Org member who had a post, and his post was course supervisor. So he was sort of being expected to, during part of the day, be going through these programs as a student. And during the other part of the day, actually supervise the other students who were going through these programs. Sergio's involvement in these programs was complete and total. I go back and forth between calling him Serge and Sergio. It was not possible to have anything to do with the TRs program or the metering program and not know who Serge Gil was. It'd be like saying, yeah, I love baseball, but I don't know who Bryce Harper is. I mean, or yeah, I'm really into soccer, but I've never heard of Lionel Messi. It's like, it's just, you weren't in the training department at Flag at this time and not know who Sergio was. He was one of the most high profile people in the department. I mean, it's just stupid. Okay, if I haven't already said it, these programs were very long. It took a long time to get through the TR's program. It took even longer to get through the metering program. So these went on for years. And it was sometime around late 95, early 96. And again, I get fuzzy with the dates, but the reason I pick these dates is because the golden age of tech was officially announced on May 1996. There was about a 5 to 6 month runway prior to that where the whole golden age of tech training evolution was happening, and Marty Rathbun arrived to Flag just prior to that. So that means it was sometime around late 95, very early 96, where Marty Rathbun arrives to Flag. And it was a big fucking deal in the training department. It was very clear that a lot of people knew who Marty Rathbun was. He arrived to Flag. I remember seeing him in uniform. His rank was warrant officer. He was introduced to me as the president of RTC. RTC is Religious Technology Center. It is the organization that holds the trademarks of Scientology. It's the organization that David Miscavige is in charge of, is the chairman of the board of. And from that position of chairman of the board of RTC, he personally single-handedly controls all of Scientology. Now, I don't know if Marty really was the president of RTC. I just don't know. We certainly did not know, as we now know, that Marty had just finished a whole stint of basically doing his own personal little version of the RPF on the ship. Nobody knew Marty had blown Scientology and had to be recovered and was promised he could do full-time training at the ship and to become a class 12 auditor or whatever. Nobody knew any of this shit. But it was clear Marty was the top fucking dog on the Flag land base. He bossed the other RTC reps around like he didn't give a shit about them. Nobody said boo to Marty Rathbun. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And Marty was in the training department for months. It's almost all he did. I remember he even had a very strange interaction with my brother Colin. My brother was very much like Sergio. They were both, they were two of the leading people going through these programs. And I'm going to make a long story very short here. My brother was going through a lot of trouble. He was having a lot of trouble. He'd finished the metering program once. David Miscavige decided to change what was required in order to finish the metering program. So my brother had to go back onto the metering program and try to finish it again. And he was having a lot of trouble and he couldn't get through it. And he started getting into some trouble. And he wrote down all of the bad things that he had been doing that nobody knew about. This sounds crazy, but I swear to God, this is true. And he wrote these things down. And he carried him around in a folder. He had a folder that he would carry, and this was one of the things that was included in his folder. And he had started doing this, I think, because if he decided he wanted to get kicked out, he was just going to give the folder to somebody, to an ethics officer, and be like, get me the fuck out of here. These are the things I've been doing. And by the way, these things weren't bad as far as normal people define bad. They're only bad the way a Scientologist would define bad. And so my brother had been watching a training film, and these training films are shown in little movie theaters. He had put this folder under his chair, and he had forgotten the folder in the film room when he left, and somebody found it and looked it up and looked at the content and was like, uh-oh, and gave the folder to Marty Rathbun. Marty goes through this folder. I remember he brings my brother Colin into the RTC office. It was Alan Baram's office, second floor of the coachman, right before the little bridge there, and confronts my brother with this and is like, what the fuck is this? I blew course every day and went to the mall and saw a movie. I mean, people watching this video are going to be like, what's the big deal? No, this is a huge deal. Anyway, my brother, after shitting his pants, just lied his ass off and was like, oh, I just made all those things up. And he's like, well, why would you make all these things up? He was like, I was just making stuff up so I could get kicked out if I wanted to get kicked out. Anyway, my brother got into a whole lot of deep shit because of all of this. And there's much more to that story. But I'm telling that story to give a little bit of context to what Marty Rathbun's involvement was in the training department at Flag, and specifically with the Flag only metering program. He was so involved in this program that when one of the students on the program was in trouble, Marty Rathbun was personally involved. Okay, so Serge was one of only maybe 2 or 3 course supervisors who were actively running the flag metering program at that time. And whereas I can't sit here and give you blow-by-blow details of conversations I personally witnessed Marty Rathbun having with Serge Gil, it's like the idea that Marty Rathbun would say, who's this guy? Never heard of him. Never heard of him in my life. He's just completely making it up. He's just being paid by Big Pharma and Leah Remini to tell these lies. I mean, it's so fucking absurd. So there's no question at all that Marty Rathbun knows exactly who Serge Gil is. Serge was one of the leading staff in the training department at Flag. Marty Rathbun was one of the most important people on the base at that time. He was intimately involved in the Flag training department. He was intimately involved in the Flag metering program. I mean, Marty himself even he insisted on putting himself through his own special version of the flag metering program. And that version was basically Marty skipping the entirety of all of the training requirements listed as a part of this flag metering program and skipping right to the final video pass where you had to do 3 metered assessments. I won't bother getting into all the details, but you basically had to do 3 assessments on an e-meter, on someone holding the cans, on a video, and there's a certain level of perfection they were going for here. And Marty's like, I'm not going to do your stupid check sheet. I'm just going to do the video. And so I remember he grabbed Marco Antonucci, who was an out-of-work trainee from Italy at that time, and he said, Marco, come with me. We're doing a metering video. They sat down in one of the metering video rooms that's recording, both sides. There's 2 cameras, one on the auditor, one on the e-meter dial. And I can't remember if there was a camera on the person holding the cans or not, but I really don't think so. And he sat down and did like 21 assessments in a row so that he could go through the 21 assessments and find 3 sequentially, 3 in a row that were perfect. Because in order to pass the metering program, you had to do 3 perfect assessments in a row on video. The video had to be passed by the supervisor, then it had to be passed by like the deputy senior CS for training, then it had to be passed by the senior CS, then it had to be passed by David Miscavige's assistant Shelley, and everybody knew the final pass came from David Miscavige. Marty basically decided that if he could sit down and do 3 perfect assessments in a row, then he could say he was still the best e-meter guy in town, or something like that. So Marty had direct involvement in the metering course room. He had direct involvement in the entire Department 11 training area of Flag. And this is just me putting all this information out there to say, Marty, you're a fucking liar. You were lower than fucking dirt. You're a fucking rat. And I can't even believe you think you can come out and say you don't know who Serge Gil is without having these kind of facts thrown back in your face. You fucking moron. All right. I've said an awful lot in this video. I don't know how I'm going to edit all this together in the end. But thank you guys for watching. A lot more to come. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye!